how to identify a lease. IFRS defines the lease contract is a lease contract as a contract or part of the contract, as a contract or part of contract that conveys or transfers the right to use an asset for the period of time in exchange for the consideration. So the lease contract means is a contract or the part of contract that transfers or conveys right to use an asset. Consideration means the repayment of using the underlying asset. Underlying asset, an asset that is the subject of a lease, and an asset that has been provided by the lessor to a lessee. Imagine we are entering into the lease contract to lease a building. The building, it could be defined as the underlying asset that provided by the lessor in order for us to use for the exchange of the consideration. An entity should identify whether a contract contains a lease with which it conveys the right to control and identify asset for the specific period of time in exchange of consideration. So the entity or the lessee should identify, it means should study and analyze its contract, whether to contain lease, whether to contain lease, which she transferred the right of control and identified asset to for the specific period of time. This is lease terms. State that whether a contract contains a lease or not, depending on the lessee having the followings. So in order for the lessee has a contract, should be based on the some conditions. That so the first condition that if there is unidentified assets, unidentified assets would be the underlying asset that is provided by the lessor in order to be used. So here we do have the underlying asset or identified asset in the sort of the building as you see from the image here. If there is no unidentified asset, there should be no lease contract. Number two is, does the customer have the right to obtain substantially all the economic benefits from the using the unidentified asset during the lease period? So the lessee, or we should ask ourselves, do we have the right to substantially benefit or to get benefit from to get economic benefit from using the underlying assets? If yes, this lessee should consider its contract as lease contract. Otherwise, there should be no lease contract. Number three is, does the customer have the right to direct how and for what purpose the asset is used throughout the period of use? If the lessee has a full control and direct the underlying asset for which purpose is to be used. In this case, the lessee has the lease contract and should consider having the lease contract. Another term that should be considered is that does the customer have the right to operate the asset without the supplier having the right to change those operating instructions. Imagine we are entering in a lease contract with a lessor, and initially we put the instructions. So if the lessor have no right to change those initial instructions, it means there is a lease contract and a leasee, or we have to consider the lease contract in this contract. Otherwise, there should be no lease contract at all. So the last terms, that did the customer design the asset in a way that be determined how and for what purpose the asset will be used through the period of use. This is as if the same the previous terms. So if the customer or the leasee has the right to design and determine how and for what purpose the underlying asset is going to be used. In this case, the leasee has to consider the lease contract over the lease term. So if the above terms are met, a contract contains a lease,